Fred was on his way to national service with his friend Patrick. On their way, they met a young woman named Alice. Fred asked her for directions, and Alice offered to help, even taking them all the way to their destination. Fred was impressed by her kindness. Before parting ways, he introduced himself and asked if they could meet again. Days later, fate brought them together once more. Fred met Alice on the road while she was waiting for her sister, Grace. After Grace arrived, Alice introduced her to Fred. Not long after, Fred asked Alice to talk in private. He told her that he liked her and wanted to date her. Alice accepted, and soon the two started going out together, becoming close and fond of each other. One afternoon, as Alice and Grace were folding clothes, Grace asked her sister if she truly loved Fred. Alice smiled and said she did, that Fred was cute and loving, but her problem was that he was broke. Grace advised her to look beyond money, telling her that Fred was smart and hard-working, and one day he would have a bright future. But Alice didn't want to hear it. She said she preferred a man who already had money and could give her the luxury she desired. Later, Fred invited both sisters out for a meal, but when Alice ordered expensive food, Fred told her gently that he didn't have enough money for that. Grace tried to stop her, but Alice refused to listen. She stormed out of the hotel, calling Fred a broke man and dragging her sister along. On their way home, Alice complained endlessly about how stingy Fred was and said that if he couldn't take care of her, he shouldn't be dating her. Just then, a man named Collins stopped his car to talk to Grace. Grace wasn't interested, but Alice saw an opportunity. She saw the nice car, the fancy clothes, and the charm, and she climbed into his car. Collins promised to spoil her with money, and Alice's eyes lit up. This was the life she wanted. Later, Fred went to visit Alice at her home. Her father told him she wasn't around. After he left, Grace told her father how good Fred was and how she believed he'd have a great future. Even her father said Fred seemed like a decent young man. That night, Collins dropped Alice home. They kissed and laughed, and Alice was overjoyed. She told her sister that Collins had taken her to an expensive hotel and treated her like a queen. When Grace mentioned that Fred had come looking for her, Alice waved it off, saying she didn't need a broke man anymore. She had found her dream man. A few days later, Fred came again, hoping to make peace. Alice greeted her father but ignored him. When he finally got a chance to speak to her, she told him coldly that she couldn't date a broke man. She wanted luxury, a soft life, and a man who could give her everything. Fred, hurt but still kind, gave her all the money he had in his pocket. Alice threw it on the ground, saying he needed it more than she did. Not long after, Collins came to pick Alice up for a date. When she saw Fred nearby, she deliberately kissed Collins in front of him, just to make him jealous. Grace told Fred to move on. Her sister had made her choice. But Fred didn't give up. He still tried to talk to Alice, still hoping she'd come back. She never did. Days later, Grace went for a meeting and took a tuk-tuk, but the fare was too high. When she got off, her dress tore. Fred saw her and gave her his sweater to cover up. He walked her home, but when Alice saw him in their compound, she began shouting at him, accusing him of bothering her. Fred calmly told her he wasn't there for her. He came to see Grace. Eventually, Fred confessed his feelings to Grace and asked her to be his girlfriend. Shocked, Grace went to ask Alice if it was okay. Alice laughed and told her she didn't care. Fred was broke, and she was with Collins now. Fred and Grace began dating. One day, while Fred was eating at their house, Alice and Collins arrived. Collins brought expensive gifts for Alice, and she proudly bragged in front of her sister, saying that money can buy anything, even happiness. Fred and Grace just smiled quietly. Months later, things began to fall apart for Alice. Her father found her constantly sick and spitting, and when he asked if she was pregnant, she denied it. Later, Alice confessed to Grace that she was indeed pregnant, but worried Collins wouldn't take responsibility. Grace encouraged her to talk to him. Alice went to Collins's house, only to find him with another woman. Furious, she attacked the lady, and Collins shouted at her to get out, warning her never to come back. Alice's world collapsed. The man she thought loved her had betrayed her. Her father, angry and disappointed, told her he wouldn't raise a bastard in his house. She had to face her own mistakes. Desperate, Alice went back to Collins, begging him to take responsibility. But Collins laughed at her. He said she was just trying to trap him and told her to get rid of the pregnancy. Meanwhile, Fred had completed his national service and earned a promotion. He returned with a new car and immediately proposed to Grace. She happily accepted. Fred even bought her a house, and they began planning their wedding. 1 year later, Fred and Grace were married and had a baby boy. They even helped Alice by opening a shop for her. But Alice was still bitter. She couldn't stop thinking that it should have been her living that life. One day, Fred forgot to buy baby milk and stopped by Alice's shop. He paid her and even told her to keep the change, but suddenly Alice began shouting, "Thief! Thief!" A mob gathered and started beating Fred brutally. When Grace got the news, she rushed to the scene and found her husband nearly dead. The police arrived just in time to stop the mob and rushed him to the hospital. Alice, realizing what she had done, ran away with her daughter to hide, telling her father to lie if anyone asked where she was. But the police found her. They surrounded the hotel where she was hiding and arrested her. Fred, recovering from his injuries, went to see her. He asked her why she had lied and nearly got him killed. Alice looked at him and said, "You were supposed to marry me, not my sister." Fred shook his head. "You're the one who left me, Alice," he said. But she looked back at him, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "You should have fought harder for our love." Fred stared at her, unable to understand how greed had destroyed such a good heart.